I was sitting in the middle of the maloca, the ceremonial hut deep in the Peruvian jungle, leading my 147th ayahuasca ceremony. 15 people sat in a circle around me in the darkness, their eyes closed, their bodies beginning to tremble as the medicine took hold. Candles flickered softly in the corners of the round wooden structure. The thick smell of Palo Santo smoke hung in the humid night air, mixing with the sounds of the jungle outside. Insects chirping. Distant howler monkeys. The eternal sounds of the Amazon that I had come to know so well over the years. I had done this ritual so many times before that I could guide it in my sleep. I knew exactly what to expect, exactly how the night would unfold, exactly what songs to sing at each stage of the journey. But that night, something different happened. Something that would shatter everything I believed and send me running for my very soul. As the ayahuasca took hold of me, I was pulled into a vision more vivid and more real than anything I had experienced in over a decade of drinking this powerful medicine. I felt myself being yanked violently out of my body by an invisible force, like a hook had grabbed my spirit and was dragging me somewhere against my will. I found myself standing in a realm that I can only describe as a throne room of darkness. The space was vast beyond comprehension, stretching into infinity in every direction, filled with a darkness that was not merely the absence of light, but something active, something alive. And seated on an enormous throne made of what looked like writhing shadows and twisted faces was something ancient, something powerful beyond measure, something that radiated pure, concentrated evil in waves I could physically feel pressing against my chest like a weight. This being turned and looked directly at me with eyes that burned like cold fire, like frozen stars filled with malevolence. And it smiled, a smile of recognition, a smile of ownership, because it knew me. It said, in a voice that bypassed my ears and spoke directly into the core of my being, "Welcome home, faithful servant. You have done such excellent work for us. You have brought me so many souls over the years." And in that horrifying moment of absolute clarity, I realized that every ceremony I had ever led, every person I had guided into these spiritual experiences with such good intentions, I had been feeding them to this thing. I had been a doorway to hell disguised as a healer. I had been serving darkness while absolutely convinced I was serving light. But let me take you back to how I became an ayahuasca shaman in the first place, so you can understand how complete and how devastating the deception was. My name is Marcus, and I am 47 years old now. For almost 12 years of my life, I was deeply involved in the world of plant medicine, specifically ayahuasca, the powerful psychedelic brew made from vines and leaves found in the Amazon rainforest. I trained with indigenous shamans in the remote jungles of Peru for years. I completed multiple dietas, which are strict isolation periods lasting weeks or months where you work with specific plants. I became a certified facilitator, recognized in the ayahuasca community. I led ceremonies for thousands of people over the course of my career, charging anywhere from $500 to $2,000 per person per ceremony, depending on the setting and the length of the retreat. I was deeply respected in the global psychedelic community. I was invited to speak at conferences and festivals around the world. I wrote articles for popular websites about the healing power of sacred plant medicines. I had a podcast with tens of thousands of listeners, where I interviewed other facilitators and researchers and advocates. I truly and genuinely believed with every fiber of my being that I was helping people, that I was doing the most sacred work a human being could do, that I was a healer and a guide bringing light and transformation and awakening into a world desperately in need of it. But I was deceived, completely and utterly and thoroughly deceived in a way I still struggle to fully comprehend. And now I am going to tell you the truth about what is really happening in those ceremonies, what I saw behind the veil of that deception, and how Jesus Christ reached into the darkness and rescued me from a pit I did not even know I was trapped in. I grew up in a secular household in Northern California, in the Bay Area, where spirituality meant yoga classes and meditation retreats, not church services. My parents were progressive intellectuals who thought organized religion was outdated superstition. We never went to church, never said grace, never prayed. The closest thing to spirituality was my mother's interest in Eastern philosophy. She had shelves of books about Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism. She taught me that all spiritual paths lead to the same destination, that anyone claiming their way was the only way was narrow-minded. Christianity in particular, she viewed as a religion of control and guilt. As a teenager and into my 20s, I struggled with depression and anxiety that nothing seemed to touch. I felt disconnected from life, watching everything through thick glass that separated me from humanity. I tried therapy with multiple counselors. I tried 4 different antidepressants. Nothing made a lasting difference. I felt like something was fundamentally broken deep inside me, some wound at my core that no conventional approach could reach. When I was 26 years old, everything changed. A close friend of mine named Daniel came back from a trip to Peru absolutely radiating with light and joy and peace in a way I had never seen in him before. He had attended a 2-week ayahuasca retreat at a center deep in the Amazon jungle, and he told me it had completely and permanently transformed his life. He said he had healed childhood trauma in a single ceremony that 10 years of expensive therapy had not been able to touch. He said he had encountered beings of pure light and love who showed him visions of his past and his purpose and the nature of reality itself. He said he had experienced the most profound spiritual awakening that a human being could possibly have. He looked at me with such clarity and presence in his eyes and told me that I needed to do this, that it would heal whatever was broken inside me, that it would change absolutely everything. I was skeptical because I had tried so many things that promised transformation and delivered nothing, but I was also absolutely desperate at that point, willing to try almost anything. So I scraped together $3,000 from my savings and maxed out a credit card and flew to Iquitos, Peru. From there, I took a long boat ride deep into the jungle to a retreat center called Casa de la Luz, House of Light. That first ceremony changed the entire trajectory of my existence. I drank the thick, bitter brown liquid that tasted like the forest floor mixed with something ancient and alive, and within an hour I was launched into another dimension of reality entirely. I saw geometric patterns of impossible beauty and complexity, fractals within fractals that seemed to contain all the secrets and mathematics of the universe. I felt connected to all of life in a way I had never experienced, connected to the trees and the rivers and the stars and every living being that had ever existed or ever would exist. I encountered what I believed were spirit guides and helpers, entities made of pure luminous energy who communicated with me telepathically, directly mind to mind. They showed me visions of my childhood with perfect clarity. They showed me the exact roots of my depression and anxiety, the moments where my soul had been wounded. They showed me the scared and lonely little boy inside me who had never felt truly loved or safe or seen. And they poured what felt like liquid light and unconditional love into those wounds, healing them, dissolving the pain that had been frozen there for decades. I wept for hours, deeper and more cleansing tears than I had ever cried in my entire life. When the ceremony ended at dawn and I walked out of the maloca into the soft morning light filtering through the jungle canopy, I felt like a completely new person had been born inside my body. The depression that had haunted me for over 15 years had simply vanished like it had never existed. The anxiety that had gripped my chest every single day since adolescence had dissolved completely. For the first time in my entire existence, I felt genuinely alive. I felt connected to something greater than myself. I felt purpose and meaning and hope flooding through my veins. I was absolutely and completely hooked from that moment. Over the next 2 years, I returned to Peru 6 more times, spending months in the jungle. I sat in over 50 ceremonies, each one taking me deeper into what I was certain was spiritual truth and cosmic reality. I began formal training under a local shaman named Don Miguel. a weathered and wrinkled man in his 70s who had been leading ceremonies since he was a teenager, who came from a long lineage of ayahuasqueros stretching back generations. I learned the Icaros, the sacred songs and melodies used to guide the ceremony and call in the spirits and navigate the visionary realms. I learned about the different plants of the Amazon and their specific spiritual properties and how to work with them. I learned the dietas, the strict protocols of isolation and fasting that supposedly purified your body and strengthened your connection to the plant spirits. I learned how to read energy, how to see illness in people's bodies, how to extract dark entities, how to hold ceremonial space for others as they journeyed deep into the spirit realm. Eventually, after 3 intense years of apprenticeship and dozens of dietas and hundreds of ceremonies, Don Miguel told me I was finally ready to lead ceremonies myself. He performed a special initiation ritual that lasted 10 grueling days. I fasted completely for the first 3 days, consuming only water and tobacco smoke. Then for 7 more days, I drank different powerful plant preparations each morning and evening, barely eating anything solid, barely sleeping more than an hour or two at a time. During that initiation, I had visions more intense than anything I had experienced before. I saw enormous serpents wrapping around my body, fusing with my spine, becoming part of my nervous system. I saw jaguars breathing fire and power directly into my chest. I saw luminous plant spirits entering my energy field and taking up permanent residence there, becoming part of who I was. Don Miguel said I had successfully received the transmission, that the spirits of the plants had chosen me and accepted me, that I was now a vessel and a conduit for their healing work in the world. I felt so honored. I felt so chosen. I thought I was being given sacred gifts and sacred responsibilities that would allow me to help humanity heal and evolve. I returned to the United States and began leading ceremonies of my own. At first, it was small, intimate groups, maybe 5 or 6 people gathered in someone's living room or out in nature. But word spread with astonishing speed because the experiences people had were so powerful and transformative. They told their friends, they posted on social media. Within just 1 year, I was leading ceremonies for 25 or 30 people at a time in rented retreat centers and private estates. I was charging $800 to $1,000 per person for weekend intensives that included 2 or 3 ceremonies. I was making more money than I had ever made at any job in my life, often $15,000 to $20,000 per weekend event. I felt like I had found my calling, my dharma, the reason I had been put on this earth. And the experiences people had in my ceremonies were undeniably powerful and real. That is what I want to emphasize to anyone watching this. This was not placebo effect. This was not suggestion or imagination or wishful thinking. People encountered actual beings and entities. They received specific information and knowledge they could not possibly have obtained through any normal means. They experienced healings that seemed genuinely miraculous by any standard. I personally watched a woman who had been completely paralyzed by complicated grief for 5 years after her teenage son's suicide receive a vivid extended vision of him that brought her total peace and closure and allowed her to finally move forward with her life. I watched a man who had been actively planning his own suicide for years encounter what he described as infinite, unconditional love and completely transform overnight, never having another suicidal thought again. I watched people heal fractured relationships with parents they had not spoken to in decades, discover their life purpose with absolute crystal clarity, break free from drug and alcohol addictions that had enslaved them for 20 or 30 years. How could this possibly be evil, I reasoned. How could something that produced such beautiful, profound, and life-changing results be dark or demonic or dangerous? Surely the fruits revealed the nature of the tree. This was the question and the logic that kept me from seeing the truth for over a decade of leading ceremonies. The results seemed so good. The healings seemed so real. The love seemed so genuine. But there were signs along the way. There were always warning signs that something was deeply wrong. I just refused to see them because seeing them would have meant questioning everything my entire adult life was built upon. The first warning sign was what happened to me personally over the years of doing this work. When I first started walking this path, the ceremonies consistently left me feeling peaceful and connected and clear for days or even weeks afterward. But as time went on, as I went deeper into the medicine and led more and more ceremonies, something shifted. I started feeling utterly drained and depleted after ceremonies, like something vital had been extracted from my very life force. I developed chronic health problems that multiple doctors could not diagnose or explain. Constant bone-deep fatigue that no amount of sleep could touch. Mysterious pains that migrated around my body. Digestive issues. I had increasingly terrible difficulty sleeping, lying awake for hours with racing anxious thoughts. And I began to feel presences in my room at night, watching me from the shadows. Not peaceful guardian spirits, but something cold and predatory that made my skin crawl with primal fear. I told myself it was just the intensity of the shamanic work, that I was processing and transmuting so much heavy energy from other people. I did more cleansing rituals, more tobacco purges, more plant dietas to strengthen and purify myself. But the darkness around me never went away. If anything, it grew thicker and more oppressive with each passing year. The second warning sign was what I observed in people who had been doing ayahuasca for many years, the dedicated regulars. The participants who came to ceremony after ceremony, month after month, year after year. Something was increasingly off about them in ways that disturbed me. Their eyes had developed a strange, glassy, faraway quality, like something behind them was not quite fully human anymore. Many of them became progressively emotionally unstable and erratic, even as they talked constantly about how much they were healing and evolving and awakening. Marriages and long-term relationships fell apart at alarming rates in this community. Careers were suddenly abandoned. Some people became almost pathologically addicted to the ceremonies, completely unable to function in ordinary life without them, organizing their entire existence around when they could next drink the medicine. I personally witnessed people have complete psychotic breaks that lasted for weeks or months, requiring hospitalization. I watched people become utterly convinced they were receiving urgent transmissions from alien civilizations or that they had been specially chosen for cosmic missions to save all of humanity. But I told myself these were just exceptions, unusual edge cases, people who were not properly integrating their experiences or who must have had pre-existing mental health conditions. The third warning sign was the nature of the entities themselves that I encountered in ceremonial space. At first, in my early years, the beings I met during ayahuasca journeys seemed purely benevolent, beautiful, radiant, overflowing with love and wisdom. But over the years, as I went deeper, I started seeing other things in those realms, darker things that I could not explain away no matter how hard I tried, beings that did not feel loving at all, that radiated malevolence and hunger. I saw entities that looked like twisted, grotesque versions of human beings, their forms distorted and nightmarish. I saw enormous serpentine creatures with cold, alien intelligence gleaming in their eyes that made my blood freeze. I saw strange insectoid beings clicking and watching. I saw things I genuinely do not have human words to describe, forms that should not exist in any reality. When I nervously asked my teachers about these encounters, they reassured me these were just lower spirits, bottom feeders of the astral realms, and that I simply needed to strengthen my spiritual protection practices and my relationships with my plant allies. So I did more protective rituals, sang more songs of power, called in more spirit helpers. But the dark beings never went away. Over time, they became more present, more bold, more brazen, as if they were losing their fear of me. The fourth warning sign was what happened to some of the people who came to me desperately seeking healing. Not everyone had beautiful, transcendent experiences in my ceremonies. Some people had absolutely terrifying ones that shook me to witness. I watched people scream in pure primal terror for hours, completely convinced demons and monsters were attacking them and trying to drag them to hell. I watched people become what I can only describe as temporarily possessed, speaking in guttural voices that were clearly not their own, their faces contorting into inhuman expressions, their bodies moving in ways that seemed to violate the normal limits of human physiology. I had been taught by my teachers that this was all just purging, that dark entities previously attached to these people were being violently expelled by the medicine, and that was actually a good thing. I would sing over them and eventually they would calm down and come back to themselves. But some of those people were never quite the same afterward. They would contact me weeks or months later saying that something felt attached to them now that had not been there before, that they were having constant vivid nightmares, that they could feel a dark presence following them everywhere they went. I never knew what to tell them except to come back and drink more medicine to try to clear whatever was affecting them. All of these warning signs I explained away, rationalized, ignored, denied. I was so deeply invested in believing this was sacred healing work. My entire identity was completely wrapped up in being a shaman and a medicine carrier. My substantial income depended entirely on it. My community of friends and colleagues was built around it. My sense of purpose and meaning in life came from it. To seriously question ayahuasca would be to question absolutely everything I had built my adult life around. The cost of seeing the truth felt impossibly high. Then came ceremony 147. The night that everything I believed was violently torn apart. It began like any other ceremony. 15 eager participants gathered in a beautiful private retreat center in the mountains of Costa Rica, surrounded by jungle. The ceremonial space had been carefully prepared with candles and flowers and sacred objects. I opened as I always did with prayers to the four directions, invocations to the plant spirits, calls to the ancestors and all benevolent beings of light. I reverently served each participant their cup of medicine. Then I drank my own substantial dose and settled into the darkness to guide the collective journey. The first few hours unfolded with comforting normalcy. I sang the Icaros I had sung 1,000 times before, walked around the room attending to participants who needed support, held loving space as they moved through their individual processes. But somewhere around the fourth hour, my own vision suddenly intensified far beyond anything I had experienced in over 500 ceremonies. I felt myself being violently ripped out of my physical body by an irresistible invisible force. I found myself in that throne room of infinite darkness. And when the ancient entity seated on that throne of shadows showed me with perfect, horrifying clarity what I had actually been doing all these years, when it revealed the invisible chains connecting every single person who had ever drunk medicine in my ceremonies to its dark kingdom, when it spoke those words that still echo in my nightmares. You belong to me. There is no escape. You signed the contract. Something fundamental shattered inside my soul. The ceremony ended in complete chaos that night. I was curled on the floor, unable to function. I could barely speak coherently for days afterward. The entity's words echoed endlessly in my tormented mind. I felt dark presences surrounding me constantly now, no longer bothering to hide themselves. They tormented me around the clock. I seriously considered ending my own life to escape. If there was truly no way out, if my soul was forever bound to serve that darkness, what was the point of continuing to exist? Then, in my moment of absolute rock-bottom desperation, when I had a bottle of pills in my shaking hand, I did something I never in a million years thought I would do. I cried out to Jesus Christ. Not to plant spirits or the universe or source consciousness or my higher self. I cried out specifically to Jesus, a name I had dismissed and mocked my entire adult life. I do not fully know why that name came to me in that moment. Perhaps some seed planted in childhood. Perhaps the prayers of someone I did not even know. But I cried out with everything I had left. Jesus, if you are actually real, please help me. I am completely trapped. I am utterly lost. I have made terrible, terrible mistakes. Please save me from this darkness. And he came. In an instant, brilliant, pure light flooded the room I was in. Every dark presence that had been tormenting me fled in what seemed like absolute terror. I felt a love and peace and power that was utterly, completely different from anything I had ever experienced in ayahuasca. Something clean and pure and true in a way the medicine had never been. And I heard him speak directly to my shattered heart. He said, You were never theirs. I paid for you with my own blood. You belong to me. Come to me, and I will give you rest. The deliverance process that followed took many difficult months. I had to systematically renounce every agreement and covenant I had made with those deceiving spirits. I had to repent deeply for every ceremony I had led and every person I had unwittingly led into bondage. I found a spirit-filled church that understood the reality of spiritual warfare, and they prayed over me many times with authority. Slowly, painfully, everything that had attached itself to me over 12 years of shamanic practice was identified and driven out by the supreme authority of Jesus Christ. I lost everything in worldly terms. My income vanished overnight. My reputation in the communities I had been part of was completely destroyed. Former friends and colleagues called me a traitor and a fundamentalist and said I had simply had a bad trip I could not handle. But I know with absolute certainty what I saw and what I experienced, and I know who rescued me. If you are involved in ayahuasca or any plant medicine, I am pleading with you to hear my warning. The spirits you are encountering are ancient deceivers. The healing you think you are receiving comes with a price tag you cannot comprehend. Only Jesus Christ has true authority over the spiritual realm. Only his blood can break every chain. He came for me in the deepest darkness. He will come for you too. Call on his name. He is the only way out.